Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial of ethical hacking and penetration testing via Kali Linux. So the next part that I would be teaching you, as I told you previously, was the evil grade tutorial, in which I would be going ahead and injecting my virus inside the softwares or software update, so that any person who goes ahead and installs the updates, then I will easily be able to go ahead and access their computer, and it will be forever until unless the updates are specifically uninstalled. But before that, I need to go and teach you the MITM attack, that is man in the middle attack, because without that, you won't be able to understand them perfectly. And for you to understand, I yesterday showed you about the ARP spoofing or poisoning, or the ARP cache poisoning, which is almost the same, and the ARP spoofing is already a part of ARP poisoning. So there's not a difference much between the two. But if you are going ahead through this tutorial today, that I will assume that you have at least the basic fundamentals of TCP/IP. You need to know what domain name systems are, the DNS servers, how they work, at least the basic fundamentals of TCP/IP and the CCNA or networking. You should know how they work and how the SMTP protocol and the UDP datagram protocol works exactly. User datagram protocol. So if you know all of these, then you can go ahead and come back to this tutorial, and it will be quite easy for you to understand. And even if you don't know about all of these fundamentals, then you can just go on the web, search about them a bit. This is the important parts like the TCP/IP, UDP, SMTP, HTTP, and all these things. And once you have the basics of all these things, you can easily go ahead and read that for about 2 to 3 hours for different parts, and you will have the basics, trust me. And those basics are enough for you to understand what DNS spoofing is. So once you know exactly how this works, then you can slowly go ahead and come back to this tutorial and take a look at this. So if you know, and if you already know what the basic fundamentals are, then let me tell you one thing. There are two different things for DNS hacking. That is, one is DNS spoofing and another one is DNS poisoning. So if you go ahead and check on the Wikipedia will say that DNS spoofing is the same as DNS poisoning, but it is not, because despite what Wikipedia may say, they are not the same. Roughly speaking, DNS cache poisoning is one way to do DNS spoofing, but there are other ways to do it as well. And DNS spoofing refers to the broad category of attacks that spoof DNS records. It is a category of attack and an end goal of the attack rather than a particular attack mechanism. So it's an attack in whole, not any part of an attack. And there are many different ways to do DNS spoofing, such as compromising a DNS server, mounting a DNS, you can say, as let's say for example, mounting a DNS cache poisoning attack, such as the Kaminsky attack against a vulnerable server from Kali Linux, or mount a man-in-the-middle attack if you can get access to the network and guess a sequence of number, maybe making many requests, or be a false base station and lie about the DNS server to use, and probably many more. So DNS cache poisoning is one way to do DNS spoofing. DNS cache poisoning refers to the following scenarios, such as many end users use the same DNS cache, and an attacker may manage to inject a forged DNS entry into their cache memory. For example, many ISPs providers will run caching DNS server and arrange for their customers, the end users, let's say, to try the IP ISP's server first, and then later on connect to the actual internet. So if an attacker can find some way to get to the caching DNS server to cache an incorrect record, then the attacker is set. He has managed to successfully spoof the DNS records and affect all the end users who rely upon this cache memory. So how does an attacker manage to poison a DNS cache? Well, one common way is to mount some DNS spoofing attack on the DNS request from the cache to the ultimate DNS server. And as you can see it works exactly, it's given over here. This is the user, this is a DNS server, and this is the internet, and I would be using the internet to get to a DNS server, and I will cache it. And these are the two internet services which will go ahead and provide. But the actual way of connecting it will go and search the internet, and let's say it will ask for google.com, but it will redirect itself to me because I would be posing as google.com. Then the DNS server will go ahead and cache it in its memory, and whenever the user tries to go ahead and try to get any information, he will connect to the DNS server. It will transfer it back to me, and since I need to provide something to the user so that he does not become suspicious, I will go ahead and redirect the traffic to the google.com. So whatever the traffic is going on in between will go through me and not directly. So I will have all the time in the world to do whatever I want, and the person will not even know that. So how does an attacker manage to poison the DNS cache? This will get a little recursive right now because basically you use any DNS spoofing attack, get the cache to accept a spoofed record. Here you can use any DNS spoofing attack that you can, and afterwards the result is that the cache will cache the bogus record, and consequently many end users will now accept that spoofed record too. So that's how the DNS cache, that's the difference between the DNS poisoning and the DNS spoofing. Now let's get back to our main topic, that would be the DNS spoofing and how exactly it works. So in the first tutorials of series, I taught you about the normal ARP communication and how the ARP cache of a device can be poisoned in order to redirect machines, network traffic through another machine, and possible malicious intent. The seemingly advanced MITM attack or man-in-the-middle attack, known as ARP cache poisoning, is done easily with the right software. In the previous tutorial, I discussed with you a type of attack like the ARP cache poisoning, and ARP DNS spoofing. DNS spoofing is almost the same. If you have not read my previous tutorial, then you need to go. I would recommend you to do so that now, because as this tutorial will go on building, you will need the basics, and ARP poisoning or knowing how it works is very important for you to understand DNS poisoning as well. So DNS spoofing is a man-in-the-middle attack used to supply false DNS information to the host so that when they attempt to browse, let's say for example www. let's say Bank of America or bankofindia.com, there is no such thing as Bank of India, but still I just took a random name, or let's say bankofamerica.com at the IP address 192.168.2.23, something like that, they're actually sent to a fake www.bankofamerica.com residing at the IP address which is totally different, which an attacker has created in order to steal the online banking credentials and account information from unsuspecting users. And this is actually done quite easily, and we will see how it works exactly and how it is done, and finally how to defend against this kind of attack. And I will also go and teach you how the normal DNS communication works, so that you need to know the basics of how the domain name system works and how they can be like you can say as a serious threat if not taken care of properly. And there's more than one way to go and do these kinds of DNS spoofing. You can have multiple tutorials, or you don't even need sometime the proper software. You can just, if you have sufficient network information, you can still do that. And I will be using the technique over here called as DNS ID spoofing. And every DNS query that would be sent out over the network will contain a uniquely generated identification number for the purpose of its identity queries and nothing else only. So I will complete this process by doing one or two steps with a single tool, and we will see the ARP cache poison and how it works. And the goal of this scenario will be to get the users on the network, and a depiction of this attack I will be showing you in exact images right now. So but that would be in the next tutorial, and that's it for this tutorial, guys. So now since you have the basics, just let's go ahead and check how it works exactly. Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial of ethical hacking and penetration testing via Kali Linux. So in this tutorial, we will be taking a look at how actual the DNS communication works. The DNS protocol, that is the domain name system, and as defined by the in the RFC 1034 and 1035, is what some consider one of the most important protocols in use by the internet. This is because DNS is the, you can say, as proverbial molasses that holds the bread together. In a nutshell, whatever you type in the web address such as http://www.google.com into your browser, a DNS request is made to a DNS server in order to find out the IP address that name resolves to. This is because routers and the devices that interconnect the internet do not understand google.com. They only understand IP addresses such as 74.125.95.103, and that's for Google. So if you go ahead and check over here, I'll just go ahead and show you. Instead of typing that, if you go ahead and type 74.125.95.103, let's see what happens. Because this is an IP address of google.com, and I don't know. Okay, my bad. If I just go ahead and show it out to you, perfect. It should actually open google.com, but let's check what's the problem over here. And yeah, whois counter KJF JFK. It should show me that this is the IP address of google.com. It's way too slow, I believe. Okay. Yeah, perfect. As you can see, this is the IP address. The host is the same and United States. And so whenever you go and type google.com, it will search which IP address is registered to google.com, and no matter what the name is, the name will not be similar for any kind of website. It may be like google.com, google.org or something like that, but no matter what happens, the name will not be the same, because the name goes ahead and provides the IP address a unique identification when the DNS tries to go ahead and gather any information related to that. That is the reason. Let me just start. Okay. So this is so the routers understand only the IP address and not the actual name, and later on the name which is registered under the IP address will get converted to the IP address, and the router will then be able to identify how what exact the DNS is of an IP address. So DNS server itself works by storing a database of entries, which is called as resource records of IP addresses, to DNS name mappings, communicating those resource records to clients and communicating those resource records to other DNS servers as well. The architecture of DNS servers throughout enterprises and the internet is something that can be a bit complicated. As a matter of fact, there are a number of books dedicated to DNS architecture. I will not cover the architectural aspects or even the different types of DNS traffic. You can review that various DNS traffics related to RFCs later on their own website. But we will be taking a look at the basic DNS transaction, and this is how it looks like. DNS client and the DNS query the response. So DNS functions in a query response type format. A client wishing to resolve a DNS name to an IP address sends a query to the DNS server, and the server sends the requested information in its response. From the client's perspective, only two packets that are seen are this query and response only. The scenario gets a bit more complicated or complex when you consider DNS recursion. Due to the hierarchical nature of the DNS structure of the internet, DNS servers need the ability to communicate with each other, and in order to go ahead and locate the answers for the queries submitted to the clients. After all, it might be fair expect our internal DNS servers to know the name to IP address mapping of our local intranet server, but we cannot expect it to know the IP address correlated with Dell or Google, because that would be illegal again. This is where the recursion comes into play. Recursion is when one DNS server queries another DNS server on behalf of a client who has made a request. Basically, this turns a DNS server into a client itself, as you can see in this system, this one perfectly. Okay, and spoofing DNS, there is more than one way to skin a cat totally, and there is definitely more than one method available for performing DNS spoofing. I will be using a technique called as DNS ID spoofing now. So, and before I proceed, as you can see, this is the local DNS server, this is the client, and this is the external DNS, and this is the attacker. So I will normally go ahead and relocate everything from over here in this way. So I will not directly send this to if it asks for Yahoo, I will not send it to Yahoo. I will send it to my own website, which is fake. The user will log in or do whatever he wants to, and I will get all the information there, and then I will redirect it to yahoo.com. The same way it works. I am the local DNS server, which is the attacker. A response query is sent, the query response comes back, and I send it back to the client. That's how it works. So there's more than one way, as I told you, and every DNS query can be modified or changed depending upon the tools that you have. Every DNS that is sent out over the network contains a uniquely generated identification number that's purpose is to identify queries and response and tie them all together. This means that if our attacking computer can intercept a DNS query sent out from a target device, all we have to do is create a fake packet that contains that identification number in order for the packet to be accepted by that target. And I will complete this process by doing two steps with a single tool. First, I will ARP cache poison the target device to reroute its traffic through our attacking host so that we can intercept the DNS request. Then we will actually send the spoofed packet. The goal of this scenario is to get the users on the target network to visit our malicious website rather than the website they are attempting to access, as you can see over here in this figure. The DNS spoofing attack using the DNS ID spoofing method, there are very few different tools available over here in total. So there are different types of tool available can be used to perform DNS spoofing. I will be using the ItterCap, which has both Windows and Linux version, and it has a graphic user interface as well, so it will be easier for you to understand. And you can download ItterCap from its own website. I'll show you if you're using a Windows version. Probably not, because this tutorial is for Kali, but still, if you need some time, then you can go ahead and see at SourceForge website. And you can go ahead and download the tar.gz if you're using it on Linux or something else, or Debian, something like that. And if it is for Windows, you can go ahead and download it from over here. And it's not much of a big file, and these are the easy files, easy to use files, so you can download either of these. This is the latest one, and I believe it was updated long time ago. Yep, fine. The latest version for Linux is over here, which is 0.7.6, and for the Windows version it has 0.7.4. I believe the 7.6 version has not yet been updated for the Windows version. And there is one more reason why I use Linux rather than Windows. Okay, so you can download the ItterCap from there, and if you do a bit of research on the website, you will find that ItterCap has a great deal of functionality, and that is beyond DNS spoofing, and it is commonly used in many of the MITM attacks. So if you're installing ItterCap on a Windows machine, you will notice it has a great graphic user interface, which can say as which works great. But for this tutorial, I will be using a command line interface, and prior to executing ItterCap, a bit of configuration is required. And ItterCap at its core is a packet sniffer, which utilizes various plugins to do the various types of attacks it can perform. So you need to go ahead and configure it in different way every time you want to use different types of attacks. The DNS spoof plugin is that what we will be doing in the attack in this example. So we have to modify the configuration file associated with that plugin. On a Windows system, this can be located at C program files, ItterCap ng share letter.dns, and if you're using Windows at Kali Linux, you can find it at root/user, that user means usr/share /ItterCap/Itter.dns. And this file is fairly simple and contains the DNS records you wish to spoof. For our purpose, we would like to use any user attempting to go to yahoo.com to be redirected to the host on the local network. So we will be able to add the entry highlighted over here in the figure. In this figure, as you can see, this is the IP address and this is the original yahoo.com. So every time the user tries to connect to this part, it will be redirected to us. That's how it will work. And these entries basically tell the DNS spoof plugin that when it sees a DNS query for yahoo.com, or let's say www.yahoo.com, for an 8 type resource record, it should supply the IP address 172.168.1.1.6.100 in response. In a realistic scenario, the device at 172.168.1.1.6.100 would be running from some form of web server software that would present the user with the fake website as well. So once the file is configured, we are free to execute the command string that will launch the attack. And the command string will use different types of options. So that would be it for this tutorial, and I will be continuing the same part in the next tutorial. Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial of ethical hacking and penetration testing via Kali Linux. So in the previous tutorial, I taught you about how it works exactly, the DNS spoofing, DNS poisoning, and about this software, how it works exactly. So I will also go ahead and at the same time start my Kali Linux, so it will be easier for us to understand exactly how it will work. So I'll just open my Linux and I will power this on. So I would be using Windows version of the ItterCap. You can sorry, not the Windows, the Linux version of the ItterCap. If you want Windows, then you can still go ahead and do that. I would be teaching for Windows version how you need to do that, but I will be showing that on Kali Linux. Windows would be on my PowerPoint presentation, and the actual tutorial will be on the Kali Linux. So it will be easier for you to work on either of the versions. So to start the ItterCap, just go over here in the applications, internet, and you can see ItterCap over here. Just go ahead and start that. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and maximize this. and you can go ahead and select this over here, and the first thing that we need to do would be to go ahead and change the entries of the yahoo.com. So you can go ahead and type let me check if I have gedit installed. Okay, I have it. So I'll just type gedit slash user share and itercap and iter period DNS. Okay, I did not expect this to be NT. Let me check. Let me just open that and see. Yeah. Okay, so we have itercap.png or filter fields, and okay, we don't have the iter period DNS file. So let's go ahead and check all of these files. Okay, no, this is not the one that we want. Let's check the iter period filter. We don't want the filter as well. Let's check. I believe that we have different versions, so it will look like itercap DNS, iter period DNS host file for DNS plugin. Perfect. So we need to go ahead and check for the sample host file on the DNS spoof. So let's go ahead and check that where it is exactly. Not here. I believe we will need to go ahead and create another iter period DNS file, which is unlike anything else you will be seeing on Windows version. So yeah, that's right. Let's go ahead and open this, and over here I will be typing two specific things that would be the yahoo.com. So and I'll show you over here as well how exactly it will work. Okay, so it will look like this. You will have to add these two things, yahoo.com and www.yahoo.com, and the IP address is in front of them. And once the file is configured and saved, you are free to execute a command string that will launch the attack. And the command string uses options such as -t, which specifies the use of the text-based interface, or -q that runs the command in quiet mode so that captured packets are not output to the screen, -p DNS spoof that specifies the use of DNS spoof plugin, and -m ARP that initiates an MITM ARP poisoning attack to intercept packets between the host, and it specifies the entire network as the targets of the attack. And the final command string for our purposes would be itercap period exe space -t space -q lowercase q space -p DNS spoof -m and ARP space / space / the space the 4 slashes specifies the entire network as the targets of the attack. And the final command string would look like this portion over here. Once you go ahead and run this, running the command would begin a two-phased attack, first poisoning the ARP cache of the device on the network, and then transmitting the fake DNS query response. So as you can see, we have the two phases of the attack over here. One is the configuration and another one is the actual attack. And once initiated, anybody attempting to access the yahoo.com will be redirected to our malicious site. And defending against DNS spoofing, now I will teach you how that will work. Now we know how DNS spoofing works exactly. DNS spoofing is difficult to defend against due to the attacks mostly being passive by nature, and typically you will never know the DNS is being spoofed until it has actually happened, because what you get is a web page that is different than that you are expecting. And in very targeted attacks, it is very possible that you may never know you have entered to enter your credentials into a false site until you receive a call from the bank wondering why you have just purchased a new board for, let's say, for any of your reasons. And that being said, there are still a few things that can be done to defend against these type of attacks. First thing first, secure your internal machines. Attacks like these are commonly executed from inside the network. So if your network devices are secure, then there is less chance of less chance of these compromised hosts being used to launch a spoofing attack. And don't or never rely on DNS for secure system. Highly sensitive or secure systems that you typically won't be browsing on internet, It's often a best practice not to use DNS if you're not using that for browsing. If you're just using that as a firewall, then it is best that you do not use DNS. You need to specifically provide your IP addresses. If you have software that relies on host name to function, then those can be specifically specified manually in the device's host file, and or use an IDS. That would be the best part. That's an intrusion detection system. An IDS, when placed and deployed correctly, it can typically pick up most forms of ARP cache poisoning and DNS spoofing. And use DNSSEC. DNSSEC, DNSSEC, it is a newer alternative to DNS that uses digitally signed DNS records to ensure the validity of a query response. DNSSEC is not yet in, I can say, as it's not in wide development, but it has been widely accepted as the future of DNS. So this is much so that the United States DoD has mandated all the MIL and GOV domains begin using the DNSSEC within the next year. And you can read more about the DNSSEC on their own website, and you will know how exactly it will look like. And finally, DNS spoofing is a very lethal form of MITM attack, and when it is paired with the right skill and the malicious intent, using this technique we can utilize phishing techniques to deceptively steal credentials, install malware with a drive-by exploit, or even cause a denial of service attack condition. In the next tutorial, again I will be teaching you about how we can go ahead and use the DHCP servers and actually going ahead and poisoning these things. And there are different parts such as the DHCP spoofing, ICMP redirection, or even the port stealing. And these are quite the type of mature attacks that a hacker will use. He will not just go ahead, and most of the time people first try phishing, and if phishing works exactly, which do work most of the time, 70% of the time. If they do, then it's good. If they don't, then they will try these types of attacks, MITM and all these things, because these require social engineering to get past through your network. The first thing, and the second thing would be to actually go ahead and social engineer your way to make a website that looks actually legit. But there would be extremely minor differences, such as instead of using a google.com, you can go ahead and use, I'll show you some examples as to how the fake websites would look like over here. Let me just check if I have the harvester example still present. Let me check. Okay, sure, that I'll use the URL crazy. So if I go and type URL crazy Google space google.com, then I will get each and every fake website that will go ahead and call itself google.com, but it will not be. So let's go ahead and check, for example. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, we have n number of websites such as google.com and googles.com or googler.com, googly.com, and you won't even be able to recognize that because you'll be using it normally on the internet, and yes, you will have no idea how or when you will be let's say tricked to go ahead and visit this website. So for the time being, let's go ahead and visit this specific website, or let's go ahead and visit the one which looks almost real to us. Let's use google.com or googler.com. Let's go ahead and copy that, and let's see if we will be able to go ahead and visit this website. Okay, I believe the account, it would have been temporarily shut down, I believe. Okay, it's no, I want googleart.com. Okay, yeah, perfect. And let's see. Okay, this is the google.com. So if you go ahead and see this website, normally if you don't actually unless you actually look into it, you won't even recognize. You will just go ahead and read this as google.com, and you will just go ahead and read everything. So this is how a fake website looks like, and normally people will trick you into visiting these websites, and you will be fooled. And it is not just the ITRCAP, they will also go ahead and use the social engineering to go ahead and social engineer their way through it. So that is it for this tutorial, guys. In the next tutorial, I will be continuing with DHCP spoofing. Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial of ethical hacking and penetration testing via Kali Linux. So welcome to the next tutorial of DHCP spoofing. So before I proceed, let's go ahead and check on Google what DHCP spoofing is exactly and how they actually define it and what is actually the difference and how one can go ahead and spoof that. So I believe you can see DHCP spoofing is a dynamic host configuration protocol that is a client and a server protocol that automatically provides an IP host with its IP address and related configurations such as subnet mask and default gateway. So as you can see that anytime I go and connect to the internet, I'm automatically provided the IP addresses for all of these things. Let me just go and open it out to you. I'm automatically provided these IP addresses and the subnet mask and the default gateway, and these all things are being done by the DHCP protocol, that's dynamic host configuration protocol. So how can, you might be wondering, how can one go ahead and spoof a DHCP protocol or something like that? Yes, we can do that, and in computer world we can do anything that we want. So this is one of the layer 2 attacks inside a LAN network that is very dangerous for information privacy and LAN integrity, and it is a spoofing attack. So this is a special kind of attack where the attacker can gain access to the network traffic by spoofing responses that would be sent by a valid DHCP server. So you won't even recognize whether it's fake or it's original. And this attack is using a technique, again the same technique, that's ARP spoofing, also called as ARP cache poisoning or the ARP poison routing, that's APR, and that is a simple LAN attack technique. ARP spoofing will allow the attacker to intercept frames on the LAN and modify the traffic, stop the traffic, or simply snip all the traffic and do whatever he wants. So this is possible because all the communication in LAN is now crossing the attacker's interface, and this communication is vulnerable to packet sniffing as well. So you might be wondering what would be the difference between DNS spoofing or ARP-CP spoofing, because they all do the same thing but still they're different ways. Yes, you are right. The reason being that all of them have different faults and flaws, and sometimes you may not be able to go ahead with the ARP spoofing or DNS spoofing, but one or the other thing always works, because there's one or the other fault in a line and you can always go ahead and take down any kind of network. The only thing that you need would be a proper open port or a proper way to go ahead and break into that firewall. So that's how it will work. So there are different ways which go ahead and finally lead to the same thing, but one thing can be way too hard, whereas the other thing can be way too simple, even though both provides the same thing. And that's why I will be teaching you DHCP spoofing, even though it does the same thing, but it has its own different way, and this will be far easier than the previous versions. So in short words, client PC is sending a DHCP request on the network, as you can see over here. So DHCP response, and this request is a broadcast from all hosts on the LAN, and all the hosts on the LAN will receive it. Only the DHCP server knows what this request means, and in the normal situation only the real DHCP server will reply to this request. So DHCP server is then replying to the client with messages that will configure the host client PC with IP address, subnet mask, and the default gateway. So this is the attacker, the rogue DHCP server, and this is the original DHCP server. So when we have an attacker PC in the network, he will stimulate the DHCP server on his host PC, that's host computer, and with this action he will be able to reply to DHCP request before the real DHCP server, because it's closer to the client host. So it will configure the client host with IP address of the subnet, but it will also give to host false default gateway and maybe even false DNS server address. So what will happen exactly is that when the client PC requests for DHCP response, it will go over here, and since the attacker's DHCP server is nearer than the corporate server, the attacker will quickly go ahead and give a response back to it before it goes ahead and reaches it to the corporate server. And as soon as it reaches it, the first one reaches the DHCP server, no matter even if it goes ahead and gets back to the server, it will go ahead and discard that because it has already received a DHCP response. And later on, no matter what happens, even if it tries to connect to the corporate original server again, they will not be able to connect. The reason being that it has already the attacker has already went ahead and poisoned its cache memory, and no matter which one it tries to connect, it will always connect to the rogue attacker's DHCP server. And it will go ahead and configure the client host with IP address of that subnet, and it will give out a false default gateway as well, maybe even a false DNS server address. DNS server address and default gateways addresses will both be the IP address of the attacker computer itself, and in this manner he will point all the communication of let's say the client host to himself. Later, he will make possible, it will be possible for him to forward the frames from the client host to the real destination in order to make the client communication more real and possible, so that even if it goes ahead and gather, DHCP server will later go ahead and convert itself for ARP poisoning or in other attack, so that this will be the middle PC, the main, it will act as the hub, and all the packets that will pass, it will pass through the DHCP server, and then it will go ahead and pass to the corporate server and then the internet, and whatever information comes back from the internet, it will then go ahead and come back to the attacker, and it will be the choice of the attacker what to send back to the person. Let's say for example, this is the internet, this is the rogue attacker, and over here at the random right side there would be let's say for example boy A, and over here it would be boy B, and over here it would be boy A. So what will happen exactly is that, let's say for example, to be a more practical example, boy A is using WhatsApp on his computer, and he wants to tell the boy B to go ahead, and he's telling that I have the money for your, let's say I have your pocket money, your dad has given it to me, and this is the account number of your pocket money, and he will send it back on this, and just go ahead and gather the money from your this is bank account, and he will transfer a virtual check over the computer, but it will receive it to this person, the attacker, and he will send back the response that okay, father has not received the pocket money, and he will be giving it to me later on at later point of time. So the boy B will go ahead and respond it back to the person, it's okay, fine, I will go ahead and collect it later from my father, but it will not reach the client PC directly, it will come back to the attacker, and the attacker will send, okay, fine, no problem, I will collect it from the bank. So for both the parties, boy A and boy B, they don't need to communicate anymore, since they both will think that their original message has been passed. But the original message is only known by the attacker over here. The reason being that he knows what is happening and which account number it is, and later on he will go ahead and gather the check, and he will disappear later on. And the people will over here will not even be able to recognize what happened, and later on they both will be cursing each other, stating that they are lying, and yes, that will be the problem between them. And so it will be either this person has went ahead and used all the money for himself, or it will be him. But the attacker, no one will even recognize that he was there, and that's how it works. So the attacker can also sniff frames, and he can also go ahead and strip off the SSL if the person is using SSH service. And as you can see from the picture, the DHCP spoofing device is situated in the local area network position. So he has the possibility to reply to the client DHCP request before the request is able to reach to the real DHCP server. The legitimate server may also reply, but if the spoofing device is on the same segment as the client, its reply to the client will arrive first, and the intruder DHCP reply offers an IP address and supporting information that designates the intruder as a default gateway or the domain name system. So what this person will do exactly, it is that first it will go ahead and respond it back to itself, and the original message will be passed over here. But by the time this response, the original response, the first response comes back from the corporate server, the attacker will already have the access, and the DHCP response may not even pass through this. It may pass if the attacker is already connected. The response will pass through the attacker's point of view, and once it goes ahead and transfers from the attacker's point, then the attacker will even know what the IP address and the MAC ID of the DHCP server are, and what are, let's say, a gateway or default gateway. The attacker may then go ahead and spoof its original gateway, the same as a corporate server. So even if the person goes and tries to get the IP address where it was connected, it will see the corporate server's original IP address and the MAC ID, which are spoofed by the attacker, and they won't even come to know, because they will think that it was normally connected, and it may be some other problem why they were not able to connect, or they have had a loss for some any X amount of money. So the intruder DHCP server offers an IP address and supporting information that designates the intruder as a default gateway or the DNS server, that's the domain name system. And in the case of gateway, the clients then forward packets to the attacking device, which in turn sends them to the desired destination. So this is known as the MITM attack, and it may be entirely undetected as the intruder intercepts the data flow to the network, but it is not stopping the network traffic, because if it stops, then the client may try to connect to the corporate server in some other way, or he may troubleshoot it, and that is not what the attacker wants. So he will not go ahead and attacker will not go ahead and stop the traffic unless it is actually necessary. So the ARP spoofing can also be used for good purposes, and very often we are being able to see wireless networks that are redirecting us to sign up page when we want to access the wireless LAN or internet across the Wi-Fi. So network registration tools may redirect unregistered hosts to a sign up page before allowing them full access to the network. It is mostly used in Wi-Fi hotspots or hotels such as McDonald's or something like that. When you go over there and you try to access the free internet, they will first redirect you to their own Airtel or whichever Vodafone or whichever internet they are using, and they will go ahead and ask you to go ahead and first use your let's say your mobile number to go ahead and register. And as soon as you register your mobile number, you will get a 6 to 7 digit code which you will have to enter, and only then the internet will start. The reason for that would be that any random person can go ahead and use the internet for fake reasons, and the person who is actually going ahead and using that, if he uses for any malicious purposes, then the owner of the Wi-Fi or the hotspot will be able to recognize by using the mobile number, until unless the mobile number is also fake and that is also spoofed from somewhere else. So I cannot say that there can be always solutions to all the problems, because as the number of solutions increases, the number of problems will always increase. And so it is mostly used in McDonald's and other sorts of network to control the access of mobile devices to the internet, and sometimes make user pay for the internet as. So for that purpose, they are redirected using ARP spoofing to a device known as head-end processor that goes ahead and redirects these things. So ARP spoofing can be used to implement redundancy of network services. A backup server may use ARP spoofing to take over a server that has crashed and apparently transparently offer reduced redundancy. So these are the examples that an ARP spoofing is not only used for malicious purposes, it is also used for good purposes, but it depends upon the nature of the person as to how he sees that. So that would be it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, I will be starting with the ICMP redirection, and finally the traffic tunneling and port stealing. Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial of ethical hacking and penetration testing by Kali Linux. So in this tutorial we will be learning about port stealing and how it works exactly. So this attack exploits the vulnerability of switch devices in a LAN. It cannot be done on a wide area network because we would be using internet, but if you have already gained access to the network, then you can go ahead and use a remote computer to go ahead and do all of these stuff. So it consists in forcing a switch to update its forwarding table. To that, it will forward the packets sent to the victim on the port to which the attacker is connected. So I understand that this might be a bit confusing, so I'll just go ahead and simplify this out. But before I proceed, let me show you some important port numbers and let me tell you how exactly it will work. So I'll just go ahead and type important port numbers first, and let me tell you what these things do exactly and how it works. Start, and by the time it starts, let me go ahead and open my notepad. I'll show you some important notes, and mine it is down, I believe. Let me check. Okay, perfect. So these are the important ports. 443 is the most important, and most of the time when you go ahead and try to hack into something, you will find all of these are except a few, like 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 port numbers, everything else will be blocked. So this is the network time protocol. This needs to be active all the time because it gathers network information and the date and day and everything from the internet. After that, we have 443, which is the SSL protocol, and without this you will not be able to access the internet. So the person whoever is managing this should make sure that the firewall does allow incoming connections, but only restricted incoming connections. And then we have the 500, the important one, that is the inter-key exchange IPsec protocol, and which is quite important. So these are the important. So just think that if any of these things are compromised, then what may happen? Let's say, for example, if the network time protocol is open and we have this port access, so you can go ahead and modify the network changes, and trust me guys, any kind of changes to the days and date can go ahead and create a hell lot of difference in the system management and everything for an administrator. and that will not be good. After that, we have the HTTPS 443 port over here, and this is most of the time open, and hackers normally go ahead and use this port or the port 80, that is the HTTP, because it is not that secure. If the person knows how to go ahead and strip off the SSL, he will use the port 443, because even if the attacker is going ahead and using the port 443 to go ahead and hack into something, and any outgoing traffic from that computer, the administrator will most of the time they go ahead and just ignore that part, because 443 usually goes through the secured strip line, and they won't even be able to know what exactly is going on, and they will think that since it is secure, it will be any part of the computer and not the attacker. So let's go ahead and start. Let me check if I could go ahead and run there. Let me check. Okay, so netstart does not work, or I'll have to run it through administrator, I believe. Perfect. Okay, and so let's let this start. So as you can see, the last numbers are the port numbers as to where exactly it is going. So port numbers work in this way. I have taught this previously, but again I will go through them. So it works in this way, like for, let's say for example, you're ordering something through Amazon or any other website or eBay, let's say for example, then they will ask you to go ahead and input your address. So you will put address like something, let's say for example, America, and you will type California, and you will type West Edmonds Road, and now West Edmonds Road, and give me any random name. Let's say Cali Hill would be the name of the building, and finally the number 45 or 46, whatever the number would be. So Cali Hill, so what it is exactly is, this is the building or the locality where you live. This is your house's number, and this is the road, and this is the area and everything. Normally we don't need the exact city or country, and so this is how it works. So how port limit work is that this will be ISP. After that we have the you can say as, let's say for example, let me just go down and cut it out, the internet, where exactly it is, and we have the ISP, internet service providers, and then we have the IP address, then we have the MAC address, and finally we have the port number. And actually we don't need the MAC ID because it would be the same. Perfect. So California is the internet from where exactly it comes, and then we have the West Edmonds Road, that is the area, that is the ISP, which area we are on exactly. The IP address would be the specific area where we reside. So IP address can be, multiple people can have same IP addresses, and you may have heard that a person has same IP address, but trust me guys, multiple people do have the same IP address, but they the ending may be different, or the ISP may be different. That's the reason they to make it more simpler, let me tell that one internet service provider cannot have the same IP addresses, but multiple internet service providers can have same IP addresses. That is the best I can go through. So whenever you go ahead and send some data from your computer, and when it comes back to you, it will first check the internet connection, then the ISP provider to where it should go, that is the road, and it is same like the courier facility. Then it will check the IP address inside the ISP, that is your area, and finally it will go and check the port, that is the door, that is your only, and that cannot be different for any person, and only that thing will go through that port. So this is how the port stuff works exactly. So normally the people, the administrator won't even go ahead and recognize that you are the one who is actually going and trying to steal something from them. So that's how it works. And now let me teach you how port stealing works exactly. So the attacker can receive the packets and read the contents once it has switched to update its forwarding table. And port stealing is a kind of attack where someone steals traffic that is directed to another port of an Ethernet switch. So this attack allows someone to receive packets that were originally directed to another computer. It does so by making the switch believe that the attacker's port is a correct destination of the packet. So understand port stealing, you have first to understand how Ethernet or the Ethernet switches in particular work. First, there is a MAC address, which is a unique address for each and every computer that is connected to the Ethernet network, and that is recorded in a network adapter. Ethernet frames have two MAC addresses stamped to it. One is the source address, which identifies the computer that sent the frame, and other one is the destination address, which is the address of the computer to which the frame has to be delivered. In the early days of Ethernet, like in the mid 90s, all frames were sent to everyone using a shared media such as coaxial cables, so everyone could listen to all the traffic. And this had several problems, security being the most important of them. Ethernet switches improved the situation by segmenting the network in such a way that every computer now has its dedicated port, and only the person that wants that specific packet will be directed towards itself, and no one else will receive that. So an Ethernet switch is able to learn who is connecting to the port, and it does so by listening to the port traffic. As soon as your company sends an Ethernet frame, any frame, the switch looks at the source address and records it to a internal table. When it receives a frame that is destined for your computer, it sends the frame only for you. The computer in other ports don't receive the same port, and once you understand how it works up to this point, the port stealing attack becomes very easy to understand. An attacker is connected to, let's say, the another port. As you can see over here, this is the attacker's port and this is the original port. And as such, he's blocked from watching your traffic, so the attacker won't be able to watch you are doing exactly, continuing MAC address as the source address. So he will go ahead and impersonate your computer, and the switch gets confused which is actually the real one. The switch usually transfers the frame to the last port, which appeared to be the owner of that MAC address. And if the attacker is sending lot of frames, he's going to receive your frame in place. So let's say for example the MAC ID. Let's say for example, I'll take a random. I will not even name it a specific MAC ID. To make it more simpler, I'll just tell that, let's say for example the MAC ID of this computer is A, and for this computer is B. So what it will go do is that it will go ahead and spoof its MAC ID to A, and then it will go ahead and DDoS this machine, that's denial of service attack to this machine, or distributed denial of service attack, so that it will go down and it won't be able to go ahead and connect to this computer, the original hub or the switch. And later on, when the switch sees multiple addresses, stating that it will see that there are multiple addresses, the MAC address of both, but it will not be able to go ahead, and it will be confused to which it should send to. So it will go ahead and send it to the last used port, which is this actually. But it will not be able to send that, the reason being that the port is already blocked by the DDoS attack. So then it will be forced to go ahead and send that a packet to this computer, and then he will go ahead and impersonate that computer, and he will have all the information. So the switch usually transfers the frame to the last port, which appeared to be the owner of that MAC address. And what happens next on this depends on the attacker's intention. He may receive your packet and keep it for himself, but he can also send the packet back a few moments later, so you receive it with a little bit of delay, and you have no way to tell that it was compromised. So port stealing rely on the fact that the switch needs to update its address table dynamically, because real networks are not completely static. For example, if you move your computer from one port to other, you would expect the traffic to be sent to the new port instead of the old one. However, there are some more advanced configuration that you can apply to a switch in order to make this kind of attack harder to do. These features are typically of the more expensive enterprise grade, and switches are not found in the less expensive small business equipment. It's typically found in the most companies and homes, which makes these environment more vulnerable. But at the same time, this isn't a very useful attack for all small networks, because it involves a lot of work to do and to capture a small amount of traffic as well. So that's how the port stealing actually works in reality, and using it is quite easy rather than just going ahead and knowing how it works. So once you know how it works exactly, it will be far easier for you to go ahead and implement that. So that is it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, I'll be teaching you about the most important ICMP redirection, and finally the traffic tunneling. And once you have all the basics right, it will be easier for you to understand how the ICMP actually works and why it is very bad. So that's it for this tutorial, guys. See you in the next tutorial.